Hello, my friends. What does it mean exactly when Mark Carney announces Canada will recognize a new country of Palestine? What does it really mean? What's the map he approves? Who's the government going to be? Do they have to renounce their violence? I don't think Mark Carney has thought through any of those questions, and I actually don't think he cares. I'll give you my theory why. But first, let me invite you to become a subscriber to Rebel News Plus. That's the video version of this podcast. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com, click subscribe, $8 a month, and not only do you get great content, but you support Rebel News. We don't take a dime from government, and it shows. Oh yeah, one last thing.
This podcast is brought to you by Rebel News. That's right. So if you want to support us, why not do it in a win-win fashion by shopping for yourself? One of my favorite things to do. Head to rebelnewsstore.com to pick the patriotic gear that pleases your heart. And while you're there, use coupon code DREA10 to save while you do.
Tonight, what does it mean for Mark Carney to support an independent Palestine? It's August 1st, and this is the Ezra Levant Show.
Shame on you, you censorious thug!
Yeah, I've been thinking a fair bit about Mark Carney, who is a minority government prime minister who never campaigned on the subject, unilaterally blessing Hamas and the PLO, two terrorist groups. Hamas runs Gaza, other than the parts Israel runs, and the PLO runs the West Bank. Mark Carney has blessed those two terrorist groups by saying he will recognize them as a country in September. I didn't know that Mark Carney was sort of like the head of the British Empire in retreat, creating countries, carving them out. I didn't know Canada had the power to do that. It's pretty awesome. I think it's probably more in Mark Carney's mind. I don't think anyone who is trying to solve the problems in the Middle East suddenly says, what would Mark Carney do? Or what would Canada's foreign affairs minister do? No Googling, no searching. Do you know who Canada's foreign affairs minister is before you have to search? And you're a Canadian. Anyways, let me play for you 3 extracts from his statement. And we played this the other day, I know, but let me just show you a few things that got my noggin jogging. Here, take a look.
Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security. For decades, it was hoped that this outcome would be achieved as part of a peace process built around a negotiated settlement between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority. Regrettably, this approach is no longer tenable.
So the first thing Carney says is that he really hoped Israel and the Palestinians could negotiate a settlement, but he's saying that can no longer happen. So is he saying that Israel's wishes can be ignored and that a Palestinian state will just be created because he says so? I'm not sure if that's a practical solution. How? But again, this isn't about practicalities. I'll give you my conclusion at the end. Here's a second clip.
The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable, and it's rapidly deteriorating. Des dizaines de milliers de Palestiniens ont été tués. Des milliers d'autres sont au bord de la famine. Le Canada condamne le fait que le gouvernement israélien a laissé la catastrophe se détériorer à Gaza. En tant que membre fondateur des Nations Unies et de l'OTAN, le Canada est parmi les premiers à défendre la paix et de la sécurité dans le monde.
So Carney accurately describes the destruction of war, which is a terrible thing. Here's an image of Mosul. The United States and the United Kingdom pounded that place to smithereens too. It's a very sad side effect of wars, especially when one side of it, the Islamic terrorist side, their strategy, their essential strategy is to use human shields. But they say that, Mark Carney says that one of the reasons he's going to proceed is precisely because of the violence. I don't know how announcing a new country when nothing on the ground has changed will stop that violence. In fact, when Mark Carney made his announcement, and the United Kingdom and France made similar announcements, Hamas took notice of this and immediately changed tactics. They stopped negotiating with the United States, Qatar, and Israel. They said, why would we change this brutal war when we just got what we wanted?
Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine.
So Mark Carney, after announcing he will support a Palestinian state, after saying he will no longer wait for Israel to negotiate it, says, oh, by the way, hey guys, just to show you that I'm not anti-Semitic or anything, Hamas has to disarm, they have to let go of the hostages, and they cannot be involved, just by the way. Except that Hamas has never accepted that. And the PLO boss who runs the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas, in his 20th year of a 4-year election, he has just simply not said that. And there is no reason whatsoever to think they will. Mark Carney has said it will only happen with those preconditions met. But he said that after letting all the air out of the balloon, saying, I'm going to do this. Why would Hamas do anything, Mark Carney says, let alone disappear? One last quote from Mark Carney.
Any path to lasting peace for Israel also requires a viable and stable Palestinian state, and one that recognizes Israel's inalienable right to security and peace.
But the thing is, part of the inalienable right to security and peace is to fight back against a military or a terrorist group that fights you. It is an inalienable right to fight a terrorist group, just like it was America's right to go to war against Japan after Pearl Harbor. But that is precisely what Carney is saying Israel no longer has the right to do. Of course, the war in Gaza is terrible. It's terrible by design. It is the Hamas tactic, their essential tactic of using human shields. But there is no other way, because Hamas is a death cult. Mark Carney has effectively said Israel cannot defend itself. But I got a few practical questions, and I alluded to some of them the other day. Would this apply to the West Bank or Gaza or both? If you look at a map, the West Bank and Gaza are completely separate pieces of geography. The one of Gaza touches Israel and Egypt. From 1948 to 1967, it was owned and occupied by Egypt. And by the way, no one ever called for a Palestinian state then. They just knew that Gaza, they were Muslim Arabs like the Egyptians, and it was just part of Egypt. It was only once Israel took the Gaza Strip in the 1967 war did Palestinianism become an issue. Same thing with the West Bank. It's the West Bank of the Jordan River, which, as the name suggests, abuts Jordan. But again, from 1948 to 1967, the West Bank and half of Jerusalem was held by Jordan. There was no call for a Palestinian state then. It was just Jordan. In fact, to this day, about 60% of Jordanians are Palestinian. They're indistinguishable from the Arab Muslims in the West Bank. And by the way, they are overwhelmingly Muslims. Under Arab and Palestinian control, the Christian pockets in both of those places have been purged. There are almost no Christians left in Bethlehem or Nazareth, and it's because they have been ethnically cleansed, just like they were in the Crusades. Mark Carney says that Mahmoud Abbas has committed to elections. I said earlier that he if any commitment was made, why would he make a stronger commitment to a foreign leader he's never met and doesn't care about than to his own people, or then, say, to the United States? Mahmoud Abbas has not committed to elections, and for Carney to rest his plan on that is laughable. Same thing with him saying that Hamas must disarm. If Hamas will not disarm, even when their benefactors of Qatar are cajoling them to do so, why would they listen to some nobody from Canada? But why would Carney say yes to this astonishing attack on Israel when he doesn't have those preconditions met? And why would Mark Carney, who's never engaged with the Palestinian issue in his life, why would he think that he can solve a problem in a way that other leaders who have spent years on it couldn't? For example, Bill Clinton negotiating very intensively with the Palestinians. If he couldn't get those preconditions met, why would Mark Carney think he could? Of course, he doesn't actually think he can. What is Canada's skin in this game? I know what Qatar wants and what Egypt wants, and I think I understand what America wants, but what is Canada's skin in the game? We're not part of the negotiations. We're not at the table. We have no assets to bring. We have no military strength. We have no diplomatic strength. Why are we acting like we're players here? Again, you can sort of guess the answer, and I'll say it in a minute. Does anyone in the Middle East respect Canada's authority or expertise? There is an answer to that, and the answer is Hamas. 3 times Hamas has thanked Canada's Liberal government. Not that we've done anything, not that Mark Carney or Justin Trudeau before him has actually done anything for the Palestinians, other than break ranks with the rest of the Western democracies. That is Canada's value to Hamas. Oh, and we did fund the UN Relief Works Agency, which is a front group for Hamas. Is it Canada's place to create other countries? How does that work? And can other countries try and create ethnic or regional carve-outs from Canada too? It's not that hypothetical. One of the things Mark Carney pledged was millions of dollars to help Palestine be created out of Israel. What would Mark Carney think if any country, I mean Israel being the obvious counterexample, were to give $30 million to Western separatists in Alberta or Quebec separatists there? Is it only something that Mark Carney can do to Israel? What would happen if what would happen if France gave $1 billion to Quebec separatists? Would that be acceptable, or is it only Canada's place to meddle in other countries? Here's the real question. I mean, it's August already. Mark Carney says September's going to be the big day, and he'll have a big press moment. But what happens when it fails? And I say that because the Palestinians, at least as led by the PLO and Hamas, they don't actually want peace. If they wanted peace, they could have had it a half dozen times. They could have had it and billions of dollars and more than 90% of the land that they claimed. It was all offered to them, especially by Bill Clinton. There was this sort of wonderful moment, sort of an end of history moment, when Bill Clinton genuinely thought he could solve this problem. But at the end of the day, Yasser Arafat said, if I sign that document, I'm going to be killed by my own people. So what happens when this fails? Hey, I got another question. I alluded to it yesterday. Why hasn't Palestine recognized Israel? I mean, don't you think if Mark Carney will recognize Palestine, shouldn't Palestine recognize Israel? And in fact, isn't that one of Mark Carney's sort of after-the-fact preconditions, which is that Israel can live side by side with peace and security? If the Palestinians, in the form of Hamas's charter, calls for the murder of Jews, and they don't renounce that, how on earth could Mark Carney still support it? A very interesting thing happened. I say again, Canada has no skin in the game. We don't have any military might. I mean, we can't even attend joint training sessions with the rest of our NATO allies. Our weaponry is so dilapidated. The only skin in the game we have is that we are resting on our history, on our laurels. So just out of inertia, we're one of the Five Eyes intelligence community. We're part of NATO. We're part of the G7. And so when Canada rewarded Hamas by saying, we're going to recognize you next month, Hamas got the message and said, oh, what we're doing works. We don't need to negotiate. And they immediately stopped negotiating. I don't know if you saw that news. In the wake of Canada's statement, Hamas stopped negotiating. Does Carney see his responsibility there? I think there is only one person who can broker peace in the region, and I think that person is Donald Trump. And I say that because he did it before. He got the Abraham Accords inked the first time around, and it's so clear that Israel now has a working relationship, if not a warm relationship, with the moderate Arab countries. And I would put Saudi Arabia increasingly in the camp of a moderate Arab country. It's clear that their young prince wants Saudi Arabia to go the way of Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, not the way of Gaza. So why would Mark Carney do something that would undermine Donald Trump's master plan for the region. Now, we don't know what that master plan is, and maybe it's not perfect. How could it be perfect? No compromise is. But by rewarding Palestinians who have not yet ceased fire, who have not yet released hostages, who maintain their bloodlust for extinguishing Jews. By the way, when Hamas and other civilians stormed into southern Israel in October 2023, they didn't say, hooray for an independent Palestine. They didn't mention Palestine. They talked about killing Jews. That's what motivated them. And if Mark Carney rewarded that, and if Hamas was encouraged by that, how wouldn't Trump be not offended, but irritated if Trump is trying to engineer a regional peace now that most of the bullies have been taken down a notch, now that Iran's nuclear program has been set back a decade, now that Hezbollah has been defanged, now that Syria has been, removed from the Russian orbit somewhat. If Trump is trying to rebuild the region in peace and Mark Carney just stumbles in and says, oh, I recognize Hamas, you could see why Trump would be upset. But none of that matters to Mark Carney. This is not actually about creating a Palestinian state. This is not actually about Israel living in peace, security. This is not about any of the things Mark Carney says. This is about domestic politics and the fact that Trudeau and now Carney are letting in more than 1 million strangers a year into our country, many of whom have a deep anti-Semitism and absolutely support the murders of the Jews. If you doubt it, look at Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa street corners every week. Every single day in Canada, 5,000 more foreigners come into this country, some as immigrants, some as refugees, and many as temporary foreign workers or students who are neither of those things. Hey, apropos of nothing, did you see this story on CNN just today? France halts all evacuations from Gaza over alleged anti-Semitic reposts by Palestinian students. That's the thing I'm trying to say about Gaza. Hamas is atrocious, and Hamas has oppressed the people in Gaza. If they had some liberal democratic government, they would have taken the billions of dollars of aid and created a Dubai of their own, but on the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. Instead, they built a terrorist infrastructure. But along the way, besides victimizing Gazans, they brainwashed them into a death cult. Palestinian pollsters say that 75% of Gaza's civilians support the attack on Israel and want it to continue. Yeah, Mark Carney, when he says those are Canadian values, he's wrong. Stay with us for more. Well, there's been a very interesting free speech battle in Canada for the past week or so, and I think it shows that the facade of the left, with their talk about anti-bullying and tolerance and diversity, it's just a talk. It's just a way to, it's sort of like when male feminists talk about how much they care about women's rights. It's quite often just a camouflage for the fact that underneath it, they are sexual harassers. I mean, I think the worst and best example of that is Jian Ghomeshi. Remember him? He was this extremely woke CBC personality who actually had a women's studies degree. And it turned out that he would sexually be violent to woman after woman after woman. He would use his TV show as a way to sort of entrap and groom these girls, and then he would punch them in the face. And every sexual predator, one of their tactics is to say, no, I couldn't be a sexual predator because I am a male feminist. And so it is. The people who talk the most about diversity and tolerance for minorities, it is my thesis that it's the opposite, that they're just saying that. And when they want to bare their teeth, they show their bigotry. And that is the case of an American pastor named Shan Fo, who came to Canada about a week ago to do what he has done before, to give an outdoor musical church service. He sings, he plays guitar. A lot of charismatic Christian churches do that. His move is to go outdoors. It's something he started during the pandemic. And wouldn't you know it, there was decision by all the progressive people, led by the CBC, to hound this guy out. And what did they say? They said it was for safety reasons. Don't you see? His views were unsafe, and it could cause an unsafe reaction by others. That's sort of the excuse they used when they arrested me, didn't they? That my mere presence could cause others to engage in disorderly conduct. Well, Rebel News has been all over the story since the very beginning, covering Shan Fo's cases, and when he was kicked out of places, covering the places that took him, covering the attacks on him. And the reporter who has been leading the charge this past week is one of my favorite people. I'm talking about Alexa Lavoie, our Montreal bureau chief, and she joins me now with all the latest. Alexa, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
You've been so busy. By the way, I thought your report on the Haitians crossing over from the United States to get to Quebec before they're all kicked out by Trump, I thought that was a great documentary that you and Lincoln J did. So, folks, if you haven't seen that, go look for it at guardtheborder.com. Anyways, back to Shan Fo. Tell me a little bit about what it's been like, because to me the most dramatic moment was when he was deplatformed in Montreal, but he found a church that would take him. It was sort of a very an ethnic church, wasn't it? Tell us more about the church and what it was like that day, and we'll play some of the footage in the background. Go ahead.
Yes, this church is quite a new church. They have been running that place for over 13 years, around that, and they are Spanish people from the Latin America, and they are welcoming everybody who wants to attend the church to worship. And it was really troubling to see that the very people that you will expect the left to defend, they were countering them by protesting in front of their church, and not only protesting but harassing, intimidating people who were attending the worship service. It was a bunch of different group of protesters, really professional protesters. We used to see them everywhere that we go. There were people with Palestinian flag, with Antifa flag, some people from all different groups. Like we can see that it's the mix of far left and Islamists who actually showed up in front of the church. And so they went ahead with the worship service, and he went also ahead, same if he received 2 smoke bombs on the stage. They didn't stop at all. They did continue, and they say that God were there because they say that the fire alarm didn't start. Same if the smoke bomb had like a lot of smoke everywhere. They say that it was a miracle that the fire alarm didn't start, because if it did, they would have to stop it.
Yeah, and the smoke itself did some damage to the church, but imagine if the sprinklers had gone on. Let me show that. We're going to play some footage now of a man who was obviously pretending to be a Christian in the pew. So he didn't have his face covered. Normally Antifa would cover their face, but he would have stood out too much. So he was in the pews, and he took out of his pocket or something 2 smoke bombs, which are a kind of incendiary device, and he threw them at Shan Fo on the stage. Pastor Shan picked one up, was sort of marveling at it, and then someone quickly took it from him just to get it out of the room. But the face of this perpetrator was caught on several cameras, and we've got some new angles. So let's just take a look. Here it is. Very clear images of him. I happen to know off by heart section 176 of the Criminal Code. Alexa, that's a section that deals with attacking churches. And the reason I know that is because it's illegal under section 176(2) to harass a church. This became very relevant during the lockdowns when police were harassing churches. You're not allowed to do that during services. Hamas is not allowed to harass a church or a synagogue. And there's all these related provisions to the church, but then, of course, throwing a weapon, incendiary devices. Is that arson? I'm not an expert in those different charges, but throwing smoke bombs at a man in a church probably is about 4 or 5 different offenses if police are being creative. And as far as I know, that man has not been arrested yet, and police aren't even making an effort to find him. Is that the latest that you know as well?
But what I know is the police have the camera footage from the church. I don't know if they found the man, because we would probably have known by then if they did. So I think they are still looking or investigating at him. But if you can see on the new footage on angle, the men were able to just get out of the church quietly and peacefully, and nobody actually stopped him.
Right.
Nobody actually ran after him. It was probably around when we found out that the smoke bombs happened, but it's not what happened. The police, after the worship service, went inside, and I know that someone from the church filled a police report. What we know so far, also for the infraction fines, the church didn't receive it yet, but I know by a source that the infraction notice had been filled, and now the church is just waiting for receiving it. But an article was released today from one of my friend journalists, Libre Media, and what they were describing in the article is they called the municipal services at 311, and they actually confirmed to them that when it comes to a concert that take place inside of the church, the city has no right of control.
Right.
So we'll see how everything turns out. But it was really impressive to see that in the same municipality, they are contradicting each other.
Right. I should remind your viewers that the Democracy Fund is defending the church. Our lawyers have been retained by the church. We will defend the church against this outrageous fine. And I should note that the city did not make any investigations. They just read the media, decided they hated this guy, and issued the fine, or announced the fine. The mayor's office did, without even having a hearing or an investigation. It was pure bigotry. As I said before, the progressive people are often the most bigoted. I want to say one more thing, because I really want to identify that arsonist, or that would-be arsonist. It's outrageous that he hasn't been identified yet. I'm sure police know who he is. The way he acted was sort of professional and calm and cool. I don't think that was the first time he committed that kind of violence before. And I think it's actually a political decision by the police not to go after that guy. But we have his face, and we put out a $100 bounty, if anyone knows his name, at findthethug.com. And to be honest, Alexa, I thought, so many people are going to know this guy. I don't want to waste money, so let's just give $100. We have not had an answer yet, so I'm going to raise that bounty to $250, and you will remain anonymous. If anyone knows who that guy is, we won't reveal your identity. You can be his friend. We've had people before who turned in a friend who did something immoral. And Alexa, I don't know if you would consider making a little video in French, because maybe he's Francophone. I don't know. And maybe his friends would see a video en français that they might miss in English. We will pay $250 for the identity of that man. And what we would do is we would journalistically publish that. We would research who he was, but we would also, the police would see that. My friend Joe Warmington in the Toronto Sun called the SPVM, the Montreal police, and basically nudged them. Why aren't you guys doing this? I hate to say it, Alexa, the Montreal police are amongst the most political in the country.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. Don't be sorry for saying something that is true. Unfortunately, it's a reality, and they don't have also that much resources to go and run a deep investigation like that. So I'm not even sure, because when I got attacked in Square Victoria, they found nothing, nobody in the people who actually attacked me that were fully masked, and it's been more than a year. So I'm not even sure that they will actually find the person who did this terrible criminal act.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, if we give a $250 reward, we'll find it. Now, Shan Fo is continuing his tour in the western part of the country. One of the most Christian places in Canada is sort of near the Lower Mainland. It's sort of northeast of Vancouver, Abbotsford. We have some of our strongest supporters there. A lot of Christian people, a lot of Dutch Christians who are very observant. So the fact that he was canceled in that Christian Bible Belt is shocking to me. But for every time he's canceled, all it does is give him more publicity, and he'll find another venue. And I think it's been a constant test of Canada's adherence to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. I hate to say it, Canada is failing that test, and shame on all these people who talk about diversity and tolerance, but they do not accept some. And by the way, I'm not Jewish. I'm not Christian myself. I'm Jewish, so I'm not. It's not that I support his particular ideology, but I support his right to say it. And it's insane that we're cracking down on a pretty wholesome guy who just wants to preach, but we're treating him worse than we treat terrorists.
Mm-hmm. And this is it's called the Streisand effect. So right now they are attacking him for being labeled by the mainstream media as MAGA. But what it creates as an effect is like now everybody know him, everybody know that there is something wrong, and everybody can notice that the Christianity is under attack here in Canada.
Listen, I think you're doing a great job. Please continue to report on this. I know other reporters on our team are also reporting on it. I think, for example, Drea Humphrey, when Pastor Shan is in the far west, she'll be covering it. We actually had a big team effort, and I think it was classic rebel stuff. Reporting on the news. We had a petition. We deployed the billboard truck in Ontario, which was really fun. Last I checked, we had close to 20,000 names on the petition, letusworship.ca. And like I say, we're crowdfunding with the Democracy Fund the lawyer to defend the Christian church in Montreal from the city. So we're doing about 5 things here. I think it's really exciting. And that's what people tell me they love about the Rebel, that we don't just tell the story. Every once in a while we get involved. And you're doing a great job on this one. Thanks for everything, Alexa.
Thank you very much.
All right, there you have it, Alexa Lavoie. She's had a busy week between following Pastor Shan and tracking those people smugglers at the Quebec-New York border. Stay with us, more ahead. Hey, welcome back. Your letters to me. The first one on the John Robson interview was Alpha Mike, who says, how is this even legal without a parliament? Well, that's the thing. In most countries, foreign affairs is conducted by the executive branch, not the legislative branch. Now, any treaties, any spending, the legislature has some hand over that. But, Mark Carney could, declare Canada an ally of Iran. And who would stop him? I mean, thankfully, Mark Carney, it's sort of like the terrible saying that Stalin had when he was told the Pope was against him, which is, how many divisions does the Pope have? Every single person in the Middle East, whether a Jew or an Arab or a Muslim or a Christian, when they say Mark Carney, who's that? So, like I say again, it wasn't to actually change things on the ground. It was just for domestic political consumption. John Sietzma says, Carney, Macron, and Starmer, the 3 stooges, and all of them doing it for the same reason, to distract from their domestic mess. The worst country in the world for that, as in a group of politicians that are obsessed with Gaza and Israel, it's Ireland. I've been there a lot. I love the Irish people, but the Irish government, it seems they talk more about Israel than they talk about Ireland. And I think it's obvious why. Ireland is such a mess. Mass migration, extreme housing costs. There's a crime wave. Wouldn't you rather talk about some problem on the other end of the world that all you have to do is virtue signal? The last letter is from Red Devil Angelfish. who says liberal fatigue is real. Yeah, but alas, just enough Canadians were spooked by the big bad Donald Trump threat. I'd say 1 million voters moved from the Conservatives to the Liberals. And that's why we have a Carney minority, and I'm afraid we'll be with it for a while. That's our show for today. Until next time, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.